This is the BBC Home Service. T.E. Lawrence, the man. On the 5th anniversary of his death, few men living are more qualified to speak of Lawrence of Arabia than Sir Ronald Storrs, who was Oriental Secretary in Cairo at the time of the Arab Revolt, and later military governor of Jerusalem and civil governor of Judea. Sir Ronald Storrs.
This is how I saw Lawrence as a man, knew him as a friend, and remember him as an outstanding rarity. He was of lesser medium stature, and though slight, strongly built. His forehead was high, the face upright, and in proportion to the back of the head, long. His yellow hair was naturally growing pre-last war hair. That is, parted and brushed sideways, not worn immensely long and plastered backwards under a pall of grease. He had a straight nose, piercing gentian blue eyes, a firm and very full mouth, a strong, square chin, fine, careful, and accomplished hands. The best likeness of Lawrence is the photograph published after his death, which hints somehow at the unhappiness latent behind the eyes. The finest portraits are Kennington's unpublished drawing in All Souls College, Oxford, known for its haunting qualities, the ghost portrait, and reproduced in my book, Orientations, and Kennington's noble bronze effigy in the crypt of St. Paul's Cathedral. In Cairo, Lawrence had, and deserved, the reputation of the untidiest officer in the Egyptian Expeditionary Force, and that, believe me, was saying a good deal. His habits were elusive. He would be found unexpectedly in my flat, reading Latin or Greek, and these unexpected visits partly cancelled out his occasional failure to appear at dinner when expected. He was very fond of music, and would sit by the hour listening to the piano with half-closed eyes. Shortly after the Arab Revolution, we found that its success was being denied or blanketed by the enemy press, which was, of course, quoted by neutrals, and we decided that the best proof that it had taken place could be provided by an issue of Hejaz stamps in Arabic, which would carry the Arab propaganda, self-paying and incontrovertible, to the four corners of the earth. We went round the Arab Museum in Cairo, collecting suitable Arab designs. When it became apparent that Lawrence had already learnt, or perhaps had long known, all there was to be known about color photography and the production of postage stamps, so that he was able to supervise the issue from start to finish. And it seemed only a few weeks before this young Hittite archaeologist was on the most intimate terms with machine guns, with tulip bombs, even with the jealously forbidden subtleties of a Rolls-Royce engine. There exists at this moment the last motorcycle he had built, never ridden, never delivered, carrying 10 improvements, all invented by Lawrence. How instinctively from the beginning he played his cards when first presented to the Sharif Abdallah at Jeddah. We sat, I remember, in a circle and led the conversation up to the whereabouts of the various enemy regiments, which was, of course, pooled and common knowledge to Lawrence's department, and for which the Grand Sharif had his own contacts of accurate information. As Syrian, Circassian, Anatolian, Mesopotamian names came up, Lawrence at once stated exactly which unit was in each position, until Abdallah turned to me in amazement. Is this man God to know everything? Early in January 1918, I was sitting in a snowbound Jerusalem when an orderly announced a Bedouin, and Lawrence walked in, barefoot from the street, and sat behind me. He remained for the rest of the day and left me temporarily the poorer by a Virgil and a Catullus. Later on, when in Jerusalem, he always stayed in my house, an amusing as well as an absorbing, if sometimes disconcerting guest. He had the poet Shelley's trick of noiselessly vanishing and reappearing. We would be sitting, reading on my only sofa. I would look up, and Lawrence was not only not in the room, he was not in the house, he was not in Jerusalem. He was in the train on his way to Egypt. In those days, there was no electric light in Jerusalem, and in my bachelor household, the hands of the Arab servants fell heavy upon the incandescent mantles of the paraffin lamps, from which a generous volume of filthy smuts would nightly stream over the books, the carpets, and everything in the room. Lawrence took the lamp situation daily in hand, and so long as he was in the house, all was bright on the Aladdin front. He said he liked the house because it contained the necessities and not the tiresomenesses of life. That's to say, there were a few Greek marbles, a good piano, and a great many books, but, I fear, not enough towel horses, no huckabacks, and a very irregular supply of cruets and dinner napkins. Not all my guests agreed with Lawrence. He was not, any more than Kitchener, a woman-hater, though if he'd been suddenly informed that he would never see a woman again, he would, I think, have retained his composure. He could be charming to ladies whom he considered to be doing something, but he regarded, and sometimes treated, with embarrassing horror, those who merely dressed and knew people. When at a dinner party, one of this class belarded her anecdotes with the Christian names, nicknames, and pet names of famous, and always titled, personages, Lawrence's dejection became so obvious that the lady, leaning incredulously forward, asked, "I'm afraid my conversation doesn't interest Colonel Lawrence very much." Lawrence bowed from the hips, and those were the only muscles that moved. "It doesn't interest me at all," he answered. I was standing with him one morning in the Continental Hotel, Cairo, when an elderly female tourist, quite incapable of understanding his talk, but anxious to be seen conversing with the uncrowned King of Arabia, moved towards him. The temperature was high, and she was fanning herself with a newspaper as she invaded him. "Just think, Colonel Lawrence, 92, 92. With a tortured smile, he replied, "Many happy returns of the day." Lawrence hated society, but loved company. He refused the post of Director of Archaeology in Cyprus because of what he chose to imagine the social obligations of an official there. But he liked to walk and talk with friends. The simplicity of his life was extreme. He smoked no tobacco, he drank no alcohol, but alas, he used a drug. His drug was speed, and speed was the dope which cost him his life. He once raced along the open road against an aeroplane and led it for nearly a quarter of an hour. He was a mass of contradiction, shy and retiring, yet no one could have been more remote from the product of the public school. And I can as easily picture him wearing a frock coat or hunting pink as an old school tie. In action, he was an individual force of driving intelligence, with nothing of the administrator, having indeed about as much of a team spirit as Alexander the Great or Mr. Lloyd George. I've tried to tell you a little how various he was. Scholar, soldier, writer, mechanic, adventurer, well, hero. Think a moment how few men that have done great things have been able to describe them in great language. But Lawrence was not only this double exception, he was also artist enough to plan every detail of the setting up, the illustration, the printing and the binding of his tremendous epic, 7 Pillars of Wisdom. On any topic you chose, he was one of those who let fall, whether in speech or writing, a creative and illuminating idea or phrase, unmistakably his, signed all over, which held your memory and recharged your spiritual and intellectual batteries. Lawrence suffered acutely from public exaggeration in all directions, and his reputation, when alive and even after, has been subjected by some to a steady dribble of depreciation. He even endured that most bitter pain, base calumny, which he had no chance, no hope of refuting. He was actually accused of a publicity engineered by intentional mystification, and indeed it must have irritated some other public servants to find a man without a dress suit and with an income of less than 100 a year, nevertheless pursued and chronicled by an eager limelight, which seemed by comparison to black out their particular merits. Lawrence was throughout the last months of his life oppressed by gloomy forebodings. In one of his latest letters, he spoke of an utterly blank wall after leaving his beloved RAF. His last to me ends with 3 words from the Greek anthology of a man who wished he'd never been born. Here is the second half of what was probably his very last letter, written on Jubilee Day, 1935, to another friend. You wonder what I'm doing? Well, so do I in truth. Days seem to dawn, suns to shine, evenings to follow, and then I sleep. What I have done, what I am doing, what I'm going to do, puzzle and bewilder me. Have you ever been a leaf and fallen from a tree in autumn and been really puzzled about it? That's the feeling. The cottage is all right for me, but how on earth I'll be able to put anyone up baffles me. There cannot ever be a bed, a cooking vessel, or a drain in it. And I ask you, are not such things essential to life, necessities? Peace to everybody. Every day for the last 3 weeks of his life, a bird would flutter to his window, tapping incessantly with its beak upon the pane. If he moved to another window, the bird followed and tapped again. The strange insistence was so visibly fraying his nerves that one morning, when he had gone out, his friend shot the bird. In that same hour, wrenching his handlebars for the last time, Lawrence was flung over them 60 feet head first onto the granite-hard tarmac. Some think he intended to resume action for his country. Others that he would have created at least one more great work. For like Plato, he felt deeply that what gives life its value is the sight, however revealed, of eternal beauty. In this he's with the great Elizabethans, Sir Philip Sidney, with the great Victorians, Charles Gordon, whose whole lives, free from fear and gain, those old perverters of mankind, are a protest against the guaranteed, the pensioned, the standardized, and the safety first existence. Lawrence, unaccountable, unpredictable, seemed to be a phantasm of the living as now he is of the dead, and it was somehow unreal to be watching beside him in his cerements, so strangely resembling the abaya, the kufiya, and the aigal of an Arab chief, as he lay in his last littlest room, very grave and strong and noble. Suddenly, in a flash, as by a bolt from the cloudless serene, he had been rapt into eternity, and we may well believe that his adventurous spirit leapt gladly to the call as the trumpet sounded for him on the other side.